What is up, Multiplex Entertainment? I am not Cody Newberry. I am Kaleb Koho. I have hijacked your list, sucks. I have stepped from behind the curtain. I am the wizard today that is now in control, and we are going to be doing something very different, something off topic. We are going to be doing DC comic books, and I wanted to yell at people about something I knew pretty well, and I went and got 3 people who I know love this stuff, likes this stuff at the very least. So we'll go. They're all pretty much veterans. So we'll go to the guy that I think has been on the most recently. Kirk Kowalkowski is back. How you doing, Kirk?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on tonight. Excited about this show. When I was a younger man, I was a pretty dedicated DC fanboy, but it's been a hot minute since I've read them regularly. So I'm excited to represent the old school and see how that compares to everybody else's list.
Ooh, shit. Okay.
Absolutely. I love that you're going to have a different perspective than a couple of us, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll go over to our next panelist, someone who's also been on a lot recently, Jay Burnz, the arsonist. Are you excited to talk DC comic books? Do you think your list is going to suck or not?
Actually, I don't think my list is going to suck, brah. I actually like my list. And I like a lot more. I had a couple of honorable mentions, but I didn't actually write them down. But this list is all over the place. I will say that. There's a lot going on my list.
Well, we're going to get into that in just a second. And our last panelist tonight, the one, the only, the Irishman, Douglas Cassel. Doug, welcome back to Your List Sucks. How are you feeling?
Man, I'm feeling great. After taking a beating last week, I decided to step back up and take another one. I think I'm going to have probably the basic white girl take on this list. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't think any of the comics that I have on my list are bad at all. I think there's some kind of main focal points, and I can't wait to actually talk about them. So.
Absolutely. I'm excited to do this, how this is going to work again for anyone who might be new watching. If you are new, know that I am not the regular host, and this is the show might not exist next week if I do my job correctly. However, the way this is going to work, we'll go through each person and do 10 through 8. They'll say what they are. We have a yikes rule. How this works is if someone says yikes, it means we're going to save the discussion for later. And we'll go through that, and then we'll go 7s through 4s, and then individually through 3s, 2s, and 1s. So with that, we're going to start with Mr. Kirk Kowalkowski. Give us your 10 through 8.
Okay, my number 10 is JLA New Beginnings. It is the run of issue number 1 through 7 of the old JLA by Keith Giffen. My number 9 is 0 Hour. And my number 8 is Identity Crisis.
Anyone got that anywhere else? Nope. Okay.
I have Identity Crisis.
Higher or lower?
Higher. It's lower. It's lower.
Okay, then we'll talk about that with you now too. So we'll start with your 10 then, Kirk.
Okay, my number 10 is JLA New Beginnings. I kind of use this as a sample for that entire run because this is basically my favorite comic book ever. Right after Crisis on Infinite Earths, a lot of the A-level DC heroes weren't available, so they basically just collected all the secondary guys, your Guy Gardners, your Booster Gold, your Blue Beetles, and kind of threw them in a team and almost made it like a comedy book. But this is where we get a lot of those the way we know these characters now, Guy Gardner, Captain Marvel, Booster Gold, all that, Martian Manhunter even, all that stems from this book. And this is really one of the first comic books where they try to humanize superheroes and make them real people and not just, tough guys in costumes. So I always loved this book. It was a lot of fun. Love the characters. So this specific run basically introduced this team, introduced these characters, and the style that the book would be for about the next 100 issues.
Okay.
My number 9, 0 Hour. This is basically, to be honest, if I'm being completely objective, kind of a knockoff of another story that I like better that's going to be a little bit further down the road I'm going to talk about. But basically, this was another house cleaning crossover from DC, getting the continuity in check. And it's a personal pick for me because at the time, this came out, I think, like 95, 96, like the height of my DC reading, and really did some really cool stuff with the characters. Wrapped up the Hell Jordan Emerald Knight story by making him the villain and bringing him in. And the gimmick for this one is they published issue 0 for every comic and kind of just tweak the backstories and the origin stories for everybody. So that was a lot of fun. I really liked that one. And then Identity Crisis was another one I just really enjoyed. This is kind of where I started to check out a DC, because this is where it went from started to go from yearly crossovers till just crossover after crossover after crossover. I kind of got exhausted from it. But Identity Crisis was fun. I just love that idea. It kind of reminded me of the Civil War comic book story over in Marvel, where there was just a fracture between the heroes and they had to take sides, and them really just exploring their backgrounds and personalities based on that. And I'm a big fan of the Elongated Man, so I liked how it centered around him as well.
Jay, we'll go ahead and I guess this is your 10th, so we'll go ahead and we'll talk to you about this too real quick.
Yeah, Identity Crisis is one of those ones that like a lot of people really don't take into consideration. This is one of the darker storylines that I've seen from DC. This deals with rape. This deals with Zatanna changing people's memories, altering their mind states, making Mirror Master, taking him from being what is considered an incredibly villainous individual to making him inept at his job. And the fact is, with Identity Crisis, when people get way too close to secret identities, the lengths that superheroes will go to, it shows that they can be just as evil and manipulative as everything else. And I love stories like that. Identity Crisis made my list at number 10.
All right. So I'm gonna go through with Kirk, and then we'll get to yours, then Jay. So I'm gonna start with your 10 there, Kirk. JLN New Beginning. I like Cody. I don't hammer on someone's number 10. That's usually where your most personal pick lies. And I can't fault you for it. The JLA New Beginning run is different, and like you said, good description of a comedy book. So I can accept that at 10. 0 Hour making it into the top 10 comics. I mean, 9, sure. I think that's the highest it could ever be. I think 0 Hour itself kind of suffers coming off of like all the different like major crises. We had Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then we got into 0 Hour and all that. And it kind of like it felt like when you go through all the crises, it's like the lowest one. So it being on the top 10, small, like, but at 9, okay. Identity Crisis is a good pick. I like the 8 to 10 range. I think is perfect for it. Very dark, mature DC comic book that also like prefaces the Infinite Crisis, which is not as good, but Identity Crisis is still like sets that up pretty well. So I won't fault you for that one. I like that one. I would put that in my 8 to 10 range. All right, so we'll go over to Jay. Your 10 was Identity Crisis. Run through the rest of yours.
9 is Brightest Day, Blackest Night, the combination, because you really can't have one without the other. And my 8 is Superman Red Sun.
That's a yikes.
All right, so we'll just talk about Blackest Night, Brightest Day.
Blackest Night is dope as shit. You get William Hand as the Black Lantern. You get to see all of the superheroes that have died, all of the supervillains that have died come back as Black Lanterns. You get Sinestro trying to be a White Lantern. You get a whole bunch of this, and Brightest Day just kind of continues that. I know a lot of people don't really like Brightest Day, but the fact is that even when the White Lantern brought everybody back, it allowed them to finish off the storylines and then still killed them off is lovely to me. I fucking love that idea, but the fact is, this is one of the best. This is one of the better Green Lantern comic books because you actually get to see Batman as a fucking Black Lantern at one point, and that should scare a lot of fucking people.
All right, so Superman Red Sun got yikes, and we already talked about Identity Crisis. So I'm just gonna go in and say it. You have this way too low, Jay. Blackest Day, Brightest Night. Honestly, could have made my top 5. I think this is maybe one of the best modern DC books because Blackest Night, in and of itself, is kind of a horror story using the Lantern Corps, which is great. And Brightest Day is I allowed the cheat combination of putting them together because you cannot have one without the other. Brightest Day is the conclusion. Blackest Night is the bulk of the story that Brightest Day is paying off. So I accepted it. But I think both of them are such a great integral. Like I think they're Jeff Johns' best story. So like I can't believe that 9 is so low, and 9 and you guys not having it on your list at all. Shame on you. You are on trial for that one.
So here's the thing. I put this on my list. I debated where I would put this on my list, but I think that the rest of my list is better. Objectively better than this.
We're gonna have to talk about that one, Jay. But we'll go over to Doug for your 10 through 8.
Cool. My 10 is Death in the Family. or Death of the Family, not sorry, Death of the Family. My 9 is Crisis on Infinite Earth.
Yikes.
Okay, and my number 8 is The Dark Knight Returns.
That's a big
Yikes.
yoinks.
Whoa. Okay. Well, we'll let you talk about your 10 then.
Death of the Family. I think this is a fantastic modern. I think this is the only modern. I have two kind of modern esque 2010s DC on my list. A lot of my list is iconic DC, and I think Death of the Family is a really iconic book because of what the Joker does to the family. The Bat family basically learns that Batman doesn't trust any of them. Not a single one of them. And it's letting the water fall down. It's honestly 10 is personal pick usually for me as well. This is one of my favorite Batman stories. It's one of my favorite Bat family stories. And you also get Joker without a face. So it's awesome. And Lazarus Pit Joker show.
I'm moderately familiar with this one. I think if you were going to pick any Scott Snyder story to put on this one, this is not the Scott Snyder to put on. You had Court of Owls in your hands, and you didn't put it there. So that's the most criticism I'm going to give you because this is 10. But yeah, as for your 9 and 8, we're gonna get into the fact that you have those way too low.
I have ones that are more iconic.
All right. Well, we'll see. We're gonna go over to Kirk for your 8 through or your 7 through 4. Sorry.
Okay, my 7's probably going yikes again. It's the Dark Knight Returns.
That's a yoinks.
Okay, my 6 and my 5. I really like these picks. These are a lot of fun. Doug just said something about his picks being iconic. These ones aren't very iconic. They're not very well known. Back in the day, DC used to do something really fun with their crossovers. You know, other than like Crises or 0 Hour when they had to do like their continuity housekeeping and really change things up. Their crossovers were events in the sense that something huge would happen, and then it would resolve itself, and things would just kind of go back to normal. You know, there weren't huge universe-spanning ramifications that to deal with, and have another crossover deal with that, or reboot the whole line. It just the story. It was a beginning, middle, end, and it was awesome, and then it was done. And like I said, my 6 and my 5 both cover those. Number 6 is Invasion, and this was a storyline back in the 80s where basically there is a collective of different alien races who decide they're going to invade Earth, and it's very simple. It's just alien armada versus superheroes, and that's all. It was just a lot of cool alien versus superhero fights, and seeing what Martian Manhunter or Superman would do when they're fighting a giant alien spaceship. And yeah, it was just, there's nothing, like I said, I can't talk about anything. It's like, oh, this happened there, or somebody died or whatever. No, it was just a cool event, and it's over. It was fun. So that was Invasion. And my number 5 is very similar. It's Underworld.
We'll get to 5.
Okay.
We'll get to 5 in a minute. Because I gotta talk about freaking Invasion for a second.
All right.
Number 6, all time Invasion. Invasion's fun. Don't get me wrong. It's fun. It's your very basic superhero alien fight. Most people are gonna know when you say Invasion, are gonna think the DC TV CW crossover, which is the lamest adaptation of this ever. But 6, I'd make this like number 10 at best, just because it's fun, but it doesn't have a ton of like substance to the book. So I don't know. 6 seems really high for me anyway. Doug, Jay, any thoughts on Invasion?
I think it's high. I think it's definitely I agree with you, Kirk, that it's an iconic book and everybody should read it, but I would put it maybe top 20. I think 6 just a little too high for that book. I do think it's a good read, and I do think it has value in the continuity of DC as a whole, and their properties, but I think just 6 is a little too high.
Jay, any thoughts?
I haven't read Invasion.
Oh, okay, well,
and that's fine. Like I said, I admit that's a personal pick, so that's something that's really close to me.
Well, Obi Rick Kenobi says he likes the pick.
Thank you, Obi Rick. I appreciate that. My number 5 is another one, probably going to be a lot of lines for everybody else. It is Underworld Unleashed. And this is a storyline where basically Satan comes to Earth and he offers to buy all the villain souls to make all their dreams come true. And what DC has always done, especially back in the 80s and 90s, is they do a great job of finding ways to make their joke characters or characters that have become a joke relevant. And they do that with that. They take a lot of superheroes who are super villains who kind of just become laughable, and they actually make them powerful and dangerous in this. And it was just, again, just another really fun book, another great read. And I'm glad you put Howard Porter's name on there because that's something I really love about this too. Howard Porter's art in this is amazing, fantastic, and the way he draws the Neuron character is amazing. And he's one of my all-time favorite artists. So yeah, another book I just really love.
I can't give you too much hell on this one because I've never read it. This is the one on your list that I hadn't even heard of. So I mean, five in terms of name recognition is ballsy, but I can't say much. It sounds like a fun story, so I'll have to read that. Doug and Jay, any thoughts on Underworld?
I'm in the same boat as you, Caleb. I have not read this book. I will check it out, though. I promise I'll check it out because it sounds good.
You've made me want to read it.
All right. Well, collective golf clap to Underworld Unleashed. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Crises on Infinite Earths.
Okay.
Anyone got that higher, or is that the highest yikes?
I think, I think. Did you yikes that, Doug?
No, that was my number 9.
Okay.
So
All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Crisis on Infinite Earths. Just the scope and the spans. I mean, it's kind of become commonplace for DC to do these huge monster multiverse spanning crossovers. But back then, I mean, if you think about where they were at, how they had created all these separate worlds and kind of the mess they had made with all their continuity and the desire to bring it together and make one world out of that, really was really ballsy and really gutsy. And I mean, it wasn't perfect. And I mean, they're still, in a lot of ways, still picking up the pieces from what they did in this because they have to keep going back and fixing things. But I mean, you got the death of Supergirl, you got the death of Barry Allen, which still resonates to this day. And you just taking all those different heroes from all these different worlds and bringing them together and letting them interact for the first time, really, all in one book was a lot of fun. I really like this one.
Doug, go ahead and say your comments.
Yeah, this was the first year-long crossover that they did like that impactfully. 12 issues, and it was almost a full year. It went from, I believe, April to March. April of 85 to March of 86, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was 12 issues.
Yeah, no, and I gotta say, it impacted the read. It impacts, like Kirk said, it impacts the storyline still to this day that they have issues with the button. The button from Watchmen is still carried over today from Crisis. It's the issues that Barry Allen's still connected to the Speed Force and everything like that is from this original event. It was super ambitious at the time. How are they going to do this? And they did it in 12 issues. And for me, it's one of my favorite crossovers. That's why it made the list. The reason it didn't make it higher is because I do have books that I think impacted DC as a whole more so. The comic line, the production company. That's why I kind of had these books kind of higher.
You said impacted DC more, and I started going.
I meant the company.
I don't
DC,
know.
the company, guys.
If there's a more impactful book in DC history than Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I mean maybe one or two. Actually, now that you say that, maybe one or two. But I think Crisis on Infinite Earths is a great pick. It deserves to be in the top 10. It's one of the no-brainer picks. My criticism is going to be number 4. I think the book is great. It belongs in the top 10, but I wouldn't put it in the top 5. I think it's a good story. It's an ambitious story, but it gets a little too ambitious at times where parts of the stories just doesn't quite work for me. And I mean, yeah, it's still impacting DC to this day, but putting it at number 4, I think is a little high for me. But I agree with you on your list. I think Doug has it just about right. In the 9, 8, 7 range is where I probably would have that land. But But yeah, now we'll go over Jay Burnz. Did you have any comments on Crisis before we get to your list?
It was my first honorable mention.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, interesting. Jay, we'll go over to your 7 through 4.
My 7 is A Death in the Family.
That was
nobody. All right.
Nobody.
My number 6, the Judas.
We're gonna talk about your 7. We're gonna talk about your 7 now. Yeah,
I've been here. So
I wouldn't know it from where you are today.
So here's the thing: A Death in the Family is one of those ones that like really kind of brought DC together. Because you have the whole story of you get to call in to decide what happens to Jason fucking Todd, and nobody liked him. So Joker beat him to death with a crowbar. Granted, I don't like. Huh?
He got killed by a bomb.
Oh, he's got. Oh! You see that? Doug is going
to go
absolutely,
on me.
Absolutely.
Listen, sorry. Technically, he just got beat the fuck up and was unconscious, but was killed by the goddamn bomb.
Let's let Jay talk about Death of the Family first, and then we'll rip him to shreds.
Let me alter my statement. This is the one where Joker beats Jason Todd to the brink of death with a crowbar. This is the one that, everybody knows the story. It's kind of DC urban legend at this point in time. Somebody used an auto dialer to call in and vote for the death of Jason Todd, like thousands of votes. This right here is like, without this, we wouldn't have like Under the Red Hood. We've got great shit that comes out of this. Doug just Jay Burnz. He's not wrong. And suck it easy, Multiplex Entertainment. Anybody else got anything to say about this?
I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here and just say I would not put this in my top 10. I think the stories around this comic book line are more interesting than the actual comic book story itself. The story itself is very boring until you get to the end. It's very much Jason Todd looking for his mom, finds his mom, Batman looking for Jason Todd, and then Jason gets killed, and Batman's like, oh shit, I lost to Robin, and like the ending's the most iconic part. So to put this in the top 10, I gotta disagree. I think 7 itself is way too high for this story. I get the iconography of Batman holding the beaten up, bloody, dead Jason Todd is a great panel, but I think that's one panel in a book that I just I can't accept that on the top 10 for me. Doug, Kirk, what do you guys want to say about Death in the Family?
This would probably been my 11. This came out for me. I was pretty young when this came out, and this is where I learned that like superheroes could die. And it was pretty impactful for me because that was the first time I really saw something like this happen. And I think, you're talking about like the actual death of Jason Todd. There are a lot of really great Joker moments in this, even after that. Some really bananas stuff. You're like, Joker becomes the ambassador for, I think it's Iran to the UN, and like has like a nuclear bomb, like all this really crazy Joker stuff. So it's a really fun Joker story. What kept it off my list ultimately was, as Jay mentioned, is the fact that it was kind of built around a gimmick, and it was hard for me to look past that. But as it stands, it's still a pretty solid book and one I really like.
I like this book. I like the context of this book, but I like the material that's built outside of the book better. Under the Red Hood is probably my 11. For an honorable mention, just because Jason Todd is one of my favorite characters outside of Under the Red Hood. I think this book has a lot of issues that you can realize that a sidekick goes through. The wanting, the needing. He didn't have, he wasn't an orphan, but he understood what Bruce was going through, and Bruce understood what he was going through because of what his mom did, and his mom's ultimate betrayal was kind of really harsh. The reason it didn't make my list is because, as I said, I like the outside context more so than I like the actual material.
I will make one last comment on this before we move on to your 6 here, Jay. I think Doug has the better death and family title in Batman's line, Death of the Family. I think it's more interesting and fun than a Death in the Family, and it still shows the sinister Joker. It's just the Joker's deeds in this book are more iconic. But I mean, the Joker pulls in a cage and he takes his face off in that book. But all right, we'll go ahead.
A jumpsuit that's called Joe. There's a jumpsuit with the name Joe on it.
This is true. All right, we'll go to your number 6 there, Jay.
My number 6 is the Judas Contract. This is a Teen Titans. This is one that like a lot of people don't think of. This is where you get to see Nightwing. This is the introduction of Terra, and this is like Slade being. This is Deathstroke being Deathstroke. Yeah, it's all about family, Doug.
It is. It's all about family.
The Bat family drinks Corona. I'm just saying.
They do.
And the Batmobile is the 10-second car. The Judas Contract. Yeah,
No, that shit's a 5.5 second car. Get it away.
Go ahead. Keep talking about Judas Contract.
Judas Contract. There's a lot that can be talked about. They just made this into an animated movie a couple of years ago, and I still think the comic did it a little bit better. This is really like the first like betrayal that the Teen Titans really ever had to go through, and it made them a little bit more jaded and wary about who they trust, especially with Terra. Like, and that Terra arc is one of the main things that I loved about the original Teen Titans animated show as well, and it made me go back and reread this to get a better understanding of what was going on. So it's definitely hit me in multiple forms of media, and that's why I chose Teen Titans: The Judas Contract.
It's certainly the best Teen Titans book, but I'll be very honest. I'm not a Teen Titans comic book fan. I like the idea of the Teen Titans. I think I think their concept of the team is fun. I think it's been done better in other mediums, like the Teen Titans show, and even Titans on DC Universe to an extent is a different take, at least. But I don't love the comics of Teen Titans. I never really have. But this is the first time that the Teen Titans like had a story that was gripping to me. But I don't think I would put it in the top 10 DC comic book stories of all time, let alone number 6. I mean, I could see it on here at maybe 10, but only as a personal pick. I don't think number 6 above Blackest Night, Brightest Day, one of the most well-written DC comic stories of all time.
That was my double pick, and I wasn't gonna put it in my top 5 because that's just a dick move.
You should have. The double pick is better than the Judas Contract. It's better than every book you've listed so far.
Would never be accepted that high.
I'm in charge, and I said it would have been. All right.
No, you didn't.
With it.
I'm saying it right now. I'm in the host chair. Doug, Kirk, anything you want to say about the Judas Contract?
Judas Contract is a fine book. I think for Teen Titans, it's like Cody said, it's one of their best books. I've never been a fan of the writing for Teen Titans. They've never had a really good, solid writer. I wish they would, because the material that's on the media front is actually 10 times better. And maybe if they converted that over to comic, you get a little more out of it. Like I said, I just probably wouldn't have put anything Teen Titans on the top 10 list.
I mean, to each their own.
Kirk?
I definitely respect this pick. You can probably tell from the rest of my list, this is right in my wheelhouse. And what I really liked about this is before this, the Titans were kind of like, a lot of like gee whiz kind of stuff. Just, they were the sidekicks. And this is where you really start to see them mature as a team. And really, this books really start to be about coming out from under the shadow of their, the heroes that they're under. So and really become more mature and start to grow up. And I think that's everything we know about the Teen Titans now starts with this story. So it's definitely a book I respect. Probably would have been maybe my top 12, 13, 15, somewhere there. So I have no problem, Jay having it where it is.
All right. Jay, what's your number 5?
What's the most boring thing about Superman? It's his immortality, right? It's the fact that he's invulnerable. Nothing can really happen to the guy, so his comics kind of get boring unless he's fighting like Doomsday or Darkseid. What happens if he finds out he only has a year left to live? All-Star Superman. Grant Morrison. Superman has a burst of solar radiation go through him. He finds out he only has a year left to live. He has to figure out a way to make sure everybody in his life is ready and willing and able to accept the fact that he is going to die. And it makes the godlike character of Superman into immortal. It's a tale of him having to come to terms with his own mortality. And I love shit like this because it's so boring to just read a comic where bullets bounce off of a guy. He's got heat vision. What happens when he knows he has to face his own imminent death? Bam! All-Star Superman.
Caleb Boatman with the comment for the day.
I will say this is a phenomenal pick. Superman is my favorite superhero of all time. I love Superman. When people say he's boring, I go, it depends on what comics you've read of him. I think Superman is the hardest character in comics to write. You have to find the right angle. This is the second best Superman book behind Superman American Alien. Because I think this book does the humanization of Superman sort of in a way where it works. It works extremely well for the story it's trying to tell. But I think Superman American Alien does it where it's not his life is on the line. It has to be mortal. It's just showing that Superman is a human that just happens to be invulnerable and like delves into the personality of Superman. But for All-Star Superman, I think it's great. It's the first comic book that I can remember that made me cry reading it. Grant Morrison was one of my favorite writers in comic book history. And this is my favorite book of his. You could say Arkham Asylum, when he just did acid in the back room and just wrote a crazy ass story. But I think this is his most poignant, heartfelt story, and it's one of my favorites of all time, especially about Superman. Kirk, Doug, anything you want to say about All-Star Superman?
Go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, I read this when it first came out, and if I would have reread it, it may have made my list. Reread it more recently. My only complaint is it may have just a little bit too much Grant Morrison in it. He really puts a heavy footprint in everything he writes, and that's hard to do with Superman. But it's not a big knock, and yeah, I respect the pick.
Good shit.
Yeah, no, I can't say anything bad about this book. It's probably one of the best, like Koho said. I just went for a different Superman book. Superman is not my favorite hero. You'll see that through the list. I tried to make it as even balanced as I could, but heroes rise to the top.
Well, you know what? You can leave, Doug. You can leave. You can leave. But this also has one of my favorite portrayals of Lex Luthor outside of the President Luthor book and American Alien. I love Lex Luthor. He's my favorite villain of all time also. Great book. And Doug, not Doug. Also, yes, well, yes, Doug, this should be on your list. But Jay, I would say this could have even been a little bit higher. Great pick. Sure. What's your number 4?
Give me 1 second. I got real quick. My number 4 is Babel. Yeah.
Okay. I got that on my list as well.
Is it higher or lower?
But I got it.
He yikes it. So
higher.
Oh, okay.
No, not yikes.
Oh.
I got it up higher. I got it higher.
This is one of my favorite. This is a Batman story masquerading as a Justice League story. It really is. When it comes right down to it, this is one of those story arcs that this is the comic that you really kind of put forth to be like, Batman is not the person that you fuck with. He literally deconstructs everybody in the Justice League. Granted, Ra's al Ghul kind of does get in there and steal his files and backups, but Ra's al Ghul is fucking 1,400 years old. So I mean, he's been around. He knows what he's doing. Tower of Babel, best Batman story arc in a very long time. Yeah, I will be right back.
Okay, Doug, you have it on your list too?
I have it at 7. It's my 7.
Go ahead and talk about it.
JLA Babel is like literally my favorite Justice League story outside of one that I'm going to mention later down the line. I think this book is perfect. It shows you how each hero can be taken down methodically. Not just, I can destroy these characters. I can take them down and mess with their psyche. It's showing that Batman is the true genius of the team. It shows you why Batman is so dangerous. Even as a mortal, why he can withstand with these gods. Batman is my favorite character of all time. Comic book character of all time because of this book. Just the meticulousness, the detectiveness that you see right up to the end. Race getting under his skin and learning how to crack the code for Batman was what made Race really a savage villain. I like the movie that they did, the animated movie Doom, which was based off of this. But I wish that they would have did it with Ra's instead of Savage himself, because I think Ra's is a little bit more on Batman's level when it comes to mental chest.
All right. Well, you're both fired. This book and the animated movie, good. Number 4 is ridiculous. It's a very good Justice League story. Is it the best Justice League story of all time? Potentially. I probably wouldn't say so, but it's up there. But I would not say it's in the top 5 DC Comics stories of all time, unless you're a Batman fanboy, which I am not. I like Batman. He's my 3rd or 4th favorite hero. But Babel is good. It's not great. And I think a part of that's because I don't love Mark Waid as a writer. But Tower of Babel being this high, I'm going to say no, and you're on trial. Kirk, go ahead and say what you want about Tower of Babel.
I've always said that if a question starts, who wins in a fight between Batman and, the answer is always Batman. And I've always got a lot of crap for that, so I was very happy when this comic came out, so I could just say to people here, this is how a regular guy, normal human, beats all these people. And like Doug said, it shows you not only how Batman is able to figure all this out, take down anybody, but also this shows you why Batman can never really be a part of this team and really never be one with the rest of this group. I mean, that's almost the focus of this book, even more than it is about his power and his ability to fight them. Just how he's always going to be the other, and that's something I really love about Batman. It's like just a tragic angle of his character, and this really focuses on it. I really enjoy it. I agree with you, Koho. As far as the actual story goes, wouldn't make my top 10. I'd probably put this somewhere top 20.
Yeah, I'd say top 20. I wouldn't put it in my top 10. It's maybe my favorite.
7.
Yeah, well, 7, a little more respectable than 4. But still, you have it at 7, Doug, above Crisis on Infinite Earths and The Dark Knight Returns.
And The Dark Knight Returns.
We're gonna talk about that in a minute. Go ahead. And,
I can tell you why if you want to know.
Go ahead and get. We talked about your 7, so we did your 7. So go ahead.
So my number 6, while Jay chose All-Star Superman, I do have a Superman comic book that I really like, and it was made into a feature-length film called Brightburn. But Superman Red Son, I think it shows what would happen if Superman landed in one of our enemies' territories. It's a very, very terrifying thing if you think about it. Whoever's on the opposite end of this weapon, because let's be honest, Superman, if he did not have the emotional support between Martha and Jonathan, he would have been just a weapon. He would have not had any emotional connection in this world. They would have found a way to control him, and he would literally be a nuclear weapon. And I think this depiction of this story was incredible. It showed you outside of, look, there's our, fighter for justice. He's on the opposite side now. We're screwed. I think this book is well done. I love all the other Supermans that are really like kind of complex Supermans, but I put this book on there because I think this had more of a cultural kind of standpoint for DC. So a lot of my, like I said, a lot of my picks were kind of picked out of that way, that thought process a little bit. But I think Red Sun is an amazing book. At 6, I think it's kind of perfect, but I will hear it probably.
Jay, you had this one too, correct?
Yeah, I put this was my number 8. I put this at my number 8. This is like DC meets McCarthyism is really what it comes down to for me. This is Superman landing in the Ukraine, and a lot of people don't really talk about this little run. This is a really good run. This is a great story. I believe you get a present, which is something that you see quite frequently, but Superman Red Sun. This is Cold War fear mongering that came out in 2003. It's an interesting what if sort of scenario to me. And if you haven't read it, it was nominated for a fucking Eisner. Go read this story arc. But if you're here talking about DC comic books or best DC comic arcs, you've probably already read it. Let me know in the comments, and then go watch Transvail.
Yeah, Red Sun belongs in the top 10. I can see it in the top 10, lower top 10. I can tell already the Superman book I said earlier is not on anyone's, and that disappoints me as a Superman fan. But
I wasn't gonna put it on there to pander to you.
You could have, and I would have given you an A+ for your list. Well, bummer. You should be more like me. Now you get an F.
No,
but Red Sun is a really good book. I think I put it below also Superman and American Alien specifically because it's a what if story that is really interesting, but it kind of answered a question that we already knew. If he wasn't in America, if he wasn't with the Kents specifically, he wouldn't be the person that he was. It was a fundamental part of his origin that we already knew. And it just kind of, I understand like the aspect of going off and seeing what the world looks like. The interesting part to me was if he landed in a different country and see what would happen. I like it. I'd put it at 10 at highest, maybe 9, because I do like it. But 6, I can understand 6. I can understand that as a like non-made, like Superman's not your favorite superhero, so being at 6, I can understand that 100%. But Superman is my boy. And also, yes, Lex Luthor is president a lot. And that's because he's the smartest villain in DC Comics. Of course he'd be the president.
That's a goddamn lie.
He is easily the smartest. Okay, you know what? We're not even going to have this debate because I know I'm right. Kirk, any thoughts on Red Sun?
This is what I actually haven't read. I've read a lot about it, and I've seen a lot about it, and it seems really interesting, and I'm sure it belongs highly rated, but I just haven't got around to it yet.
Fair enough. All right, what is your number 5? Doug?
Number 5. Most people aren't surprised. I like Batman. One of my favorite Batman tales is Batman: The Long Halloween. I think this book was great. I think you didn't
hold on. No yikes? None. Bueller? You're all on trial. Go ahead.
I think this is one of the best Batman stories. When you go to singular Batman stories, it's got one of the most surprising villains in Calendar Man, being revealed as the Holiday Killer. Also, if you don't know who Calendar Man is, look him up. He's fucking great as like a B/C rated villain, but Long Halloween kind of gives it. It leads you with the misdirect of Harvey Dent the entire time, which is fantastic. You get Carmen Falcone back in it during his daughter's wedding at the beginning, and then all this shit starts flying. I can't say enough about this comic. It's one of my favorite Batman comics of all time. I don't really have any more Batman comics on this list, so 5 is the top on the Batman for me, even though he's my favorite comic book hero of all time. I just think there's more well-written books. I think 5 is a perfect spot for Long Halloween.
You are all insane for not having the Long Halloween higher. This is like, I would say this is even a little low, Doug, but I know what you have ahead of it. I will say, for the most part, I can agree.
I know which one that you're disagreeing
For the most part, I agree. But there's going to be 1, maybe 2 that I disagree with. The Long Halloween is a crime noir with Batman, which is exactly how Batman should be used. It is literally the detective crime story that reinvents the mythos of Batman as it goes, with Catwoman and the Falcones and Two-Face, and it is a crime thriller that is one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite genres of anything is crime thriller. So doing that with Batman, with Jeff Lowe writing it excellently, fantastic. I think it's the best Batman story, period. And I am very, very, very shocked that you guys not only don't have it in the top 5, don't have it. You don't have it, Kirk. What is wrong with The Long Halloween? Not enough aliens attacking Earth for you?
No, there's nothing wrong with it. This is another one I read when it first came out, and maybe on a reread, I'd remember because I remember liking it. But I mean, there's honestly, like you guys are telling me that a lot of stuff I don't remember about it, so kind of just maybe didn't resonate with me as much. I think it was more. I think the thing with this is more about. It seemed to me like it was more about the holidays and the gimmicks than it was about all the Batman stuff. So maybe you're right. Maybe I need to revisit it. But, I mean, I'm not going to complain about being on here at all.
I recommend the revisit if you think it's just about the Holiday Man gimmicks from the Calendar Man. Jay, buddy, you're one of the most knowledgeable comic book fans I know. What the fuck is wrong with you for not having The Long Halloween?
Here's the thing. What is one thing that always happens every time everybody makes a list? Especially when it's something that we're passionate about, we all would probably end up choosing roughly the same things. So I wanted to bring a list that brought a little bit more flavor to it instead of us just yikesing the fuck out of every single one of our choices. So I made a conscious decision to actually keep this one off the list. At least one of these other two fucking mooks here would have it. I love Batman The Long Halloween, though.
I'm the only one.
I'm the only. I said one of the other two. I said one of the other two. I'm pointing the wrong way. That way.
You are on trial because I don't think that is looking at your list, there are Batmans still there, and you picked other Batmans that you decided that should be talked about instead of Long Halloween. For that, good day, sir. You are on trial. Your list sucks. Your list sucks. All right, Doug, what's your number 4?
Cool. So my number 4 is a little book known as V for Vendetta. I think this is an amazing book that took not 1 year to complete, not 2 years to complete, but a total of 7 fucking years to complete. He didn't complete the arc until 1989. Do you know the first publication? 1982. This was an amazing book that took an outside perspective on a tyrannical government and made you give a shit about what was going on in that government. V is one of, if not the best masked character you could probably get out of a normal human being. Even though we don't know if he's really a normal human being, he or she. But I think the artwork in this is beautiful. This shows you what a beautiful mind. I'm saving one other thing for later, but what a beautiful mind Alan Moore has. It's creative. It's integral to the comic community because there's stories that picked off of this book and another book that I'm going to mention much later down the line. Continuously to this day, there's stuff. The hero that's not a hero that sacrifices himself or herself in the end is something that was taken from this book methodically in DC later down the line. I think it's one of the best Alan Moore books. I'll talk about one later, but it's one of the best.
Alan Moore in the discussion for the greatest comic book author of all time. In the discussion.
Fact.
And V for Vendetta is one of his best works. I would maybe put it as his 3rd best work of all time. So
You're quoting ERB there, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. What?
You're quoting ERB there, sir.
Am I? Oh well, yeah. I did not realize. But no, V for Vendetta, good pick. Number 4, little high for me. Little high. I like the book a lot. I can understand it being in the top 10. I would never say it shouldn't be. But to put it in the top 5, I think is a little bit much. I think it is a good book. It's a very well written book. The dialogue of the character of V is some of the best that Alan Moore's ever done. However, it gets a little too plotty for me at times, which some Alan Moore books usually do. And I think this is the one that indulges himself a lot in going down rabbit holes to be like, all right, we're going off here and now here and here and here to continue to tell the plot, especially the stuff that happens with TV. It gets a little convoluted a bit, which Alan Moore does very well as convolution. So, yeah, not my top 5, but sure, top 10 maybe. Either of you, Kirk or Jay, have anything you want to say about why no V for Vendetta?
I agree with you. It's very, very plotty, very dense. I do agree that Alan Moore is a great writer, and I think Alan Moore would agree with that as well. And that comes out a lot in his writing sometimes, where he's just putting it all down, and it's all going to be there. It's just a lot of stream of consciousness. And I felt, like, okay, as there's certain parts of this book where I'm like, okay, let's just get on with it. I know this might be blasphemous to say. I think the movie does a good job of streamlining all of the story, where the book kind of just drags. There's just too much in it that slows me down for me to put up my top 10. But I can respect the pick.
I agree with you there, Kirk. Jay.
Voila, in view, a humble vaudevillian veteran cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate. No. I like this comic, or I like this graphic novel, I should say. It really comes down to the fact that this is a take on Orwell, and it's one of the better ones that's been done. When you put pen to page, when you ink it, I connected more personally to the movie because A, I love Hugo Weaving, and B, it's really one of the first times you get to see a burn victim as a badass. So that's where my connection comes to it. I respect you for putting it on the list. It's good. You're not wrong. Alan Moore can be a little bit wordy sometimes, and we'll probably get into that here in a little bit. I still think that this works though. This works, and I do respect the choice for this being on your list.
All right, we will go back to Kirk. Hit us with your number 3.
Okay, my number 3 is Kingdom Come.
Yikes.
All right, so we're
Okay.
gonna save that then. Jay, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Injustice. Gods Among Us. Tom Taylor.
No one, huh? Okay.
I'm mainly speaking on the first 2 years, but it's Injustice. You kind of have to go year 1 through 5. This is one of those things where we've talked about dark comic books coming up a lot on this list. Year 2 is by far probably one of the darker years in the Injustice storyline. Sinestro literally destroys Kyle Rayner. He fucking he draws and quarters him in the darkness of space, and it's shown on a splash page at the end. You get Superman, who ends up killing Lois Lane and his unborn son. You get the Joker having probably one of his most ingenious plans ever, connecting Lois Lane's heartbeat to a nuclear bomb. And once it's detected that she no longer has a heartbeat, blows up an entire city with a nuclear weapon. You get to see what happens if Superman literally lives through one bad day. Injustice is in comic book to a video game, technically not so much. The video game came after, but once they made Injustice 2, they kind of had to tie it in with the comic book, so they had to do a little bit of a rewrite. It's a little bit wonky, but years 1 and 2 are by far some of the darkest materials that DC has ever put out, and I love this comic book. If you haven't given Alfred out of Superman because he took a Kryptonian power pill, you get the recreation of Batman Bane, the broken back, Alfred beating the shit out of Superman and saying he is disappointed in Superman and saying there's nothing left to save here is still one of the best scenes in a comic book that I've ever read. You can't hurt my family anymore. Boom. Injustice, Gods Among Us. Number 3.
Very recent pick, very niche pick, an excellent pick. Injustice, Gods Among Us. When it comes to the tie-in comics, no one expects a tie-in comic to be good. And then Tom Taylor's first 2 years of Injustice Gods Among Us are some of the best comic book stories of the last 10 years. The exploration into the world of Injustice, into the world of a Superman regime, of literally how you said, Superman goes up against the Joker and loses in one bad day. And it takes almost the killing joke for Superman and shows Superman losing in that scenario and what the world looks like as a result. I think it's great. Years 3, 4, and 5 get a little plotty. And I think that's more because of Brian Bucoletto taking over from Tom Taylor. Different writer, you could tell. But once it ties in back into the first game, I think it wraps up really well. We get a little lost in the last couple of years, but if we did, like you said, specifically the first 2 years of Tom Taylor's run of it, an excellent book. I can completely respect and understand it. 3, in fact, it might make my top 5. If you've never read Injustice, I highly recommend it. Just like Jay says, great pick, sir. Doug, why no Injustice? Haven't read it? Don't like it?
Yes, I've read it. Yes, I like it. The question posed was top 10 DC properties, and when I think of that, Injustice for me is more so about the video game than it is about the actual DC property. While I do love this book, I have an Elseworld pick too later down the line. But there's no justification. I guess everybody has their own list and how they pick the list. I just went more so what helped DC, whereas this helped the game and sell more copies of the game. And you know, I can see the pick. I can respect the pick because it's Jay's list, but I have a different method of picking my list.
I can understand that. I can respect it. Doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Kirk, what? Read Injustice? Haven't read Injustice?
I've read some of it. I haven't read all of it. And what I would have, I mean, I think it's a great looking book and it's a fun book and it's a good little cool stories. But it still does have a tie-in feel to me, and it feels like it's more about, just what would be cool if this happened or that happened, and just like these, it's just about those splash moments to like get that for the shock value. So again, I mean, I'm in the same boat with Doug. I don't think it's a bad pick, but there's just a few things about it. Again, not having read the entire line, but also, like I said, it feels a little too gimmicky to me. So that's why I wouldn't make my top 10.
Fair enough. All right, we'll go over to Douche. You're number 3.
Here's the one that Caleb's going to try and rip me apart for. I can see it in his eyes. I can see the fire burning. My number 3 is Flashpoint.
Oh.
I think this book is incredible. I think this book plays out what if Barry Allen didn't care but for himself. He went back in time and became the villain of his own damn story. You see Wonder Woman and Aquaman at war. You see a different Cyborg. You see 7 orphans become fucking Shazam. Harley Quinn is not on the side of bad. You see Thomas Wayne become Batman. Guess who's the Joker? Motherfucking Martha Wayne. Are you kidding me? That is a great concept, and it was a fantastic book. It also ties in very well to what they needed to do to kind of recorrect a lot of things that they messed up. I think this book reinvigorated a lot of comic book readers. Believe it or not, you can have that view, but it did. I was in the comic shop when it first came out. I had new readers reading this book because they found it interesting. And when I showed them this, I showed them Crisis on Infinite Earth. I showed them a bunch of other stuff. I think this is a really good Flash story.
Flashpoint might have reinvigorated readers, but that doesn't make it a top 3 DC comic book of all time, dog. Flashpoint is a really cool world that gives you really cool glimpses at things you want to read books about that they later wrote books about. They wrote books about Thomas and Martha Wayne later. They wrote books about Aquaman versus Wonder Woman later. But the entirety of Flashpoint is about Flash going, that's something happening over there. That's something happening over there. But mainly, let me get back to the main time so we can start the new 52, which is the worst thing to ever happen to DC comic books. You literally picked the book that Jeff Johns went, I'm going to write this story. I think it's a cool story, but it's really not really that cool of a story. It's just setting up a cool world that we kind of explore. And then we get the new 52. We get the new 52, Doug. This is how you get Jeff Johns to keep only Green Lantern and Flash things that he wrote to be canon and throw everything else away because it's not Jeff Johns. Get out of here, Doug. You are on trial. Jay Burnz.
I knew as soon as I put it on 3, Caleb was gonna.
Jay Burnz. Thoughts on Flashpoint?
A 90-minute animated movie did it better.
That right there. That is correct. Points to Jay. Kirk, thoughts on Flashpoint?
I know you and I don't see eye to eye on a lot, Koho, but I mean, I'm on the exact same boat with you. I mean, this is what started New 52, and there's a lot of problems with New 52. So that's mainly what I think of when I think of Flashpoint. I also agree with Jay. I think the animated movie was a lot tighter, told a better story. But yeah, like I said, it ends with the mess of New 52, and I can't separate that in my head.
Also, just one last thing. God damn it, Barry!
You are on
Leave
trial.
Barry Allen alone. Leave Barry Allen alone. He learned. Listen, Barry Allen's the fastest Flash. Test me.
Yeah, you sound like Jeff Johns. All right, Kirk. What is your number 2?
Flash.
My number 2 is The Killing Joke.
Nice.
And this is one. Joker is my favorite villain of all time. He may be my favorite fictional character of all time.
Is there a yikes on Killing Joke?
Oh, there was a yikes.
Jay's
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. My bad.
All right. You're good. Jay, what is your number 2?
The Dark Knight Returns is my number 2.
All right. Go ahead, and you'll all get a chance to talk about this one because you all had it. So, Jay, start.
Look, this is what you get when you get an older Batman. This is one of my favorite things to read. This has got one of the most iconic covers to a comic book of all time. And it's not just that, it's got one of the best stories, best multiple stories. Granted, okay, nobody really likes Carrie Kelly, yada, 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 yada. Okay, whatever. Yeah, she's not that good, whatever. I don't give a fuck about her. It's about Batman. It ain't about her. Is it? It is. And I will reference the animated movie. Oh
no! If I couldn't reference the animated movie with Flash,
you could have referenced it.
No, I couldn't.
Could have referenced it. Yes, you could have.
Me.
You could have referenced it. You just waited until I did it.
Order in the court.
Punch you in the tape.
Order in the court.
Punch you in the tape. Frank Miller knows. Fuck it. I will let y'all rip me apart. But I think 2 is the perfect spot for The Dark Knight Returns. This is great story. This is great Joker. This is great, just mutant fights. This is old Batman on a horse is everything. Garth, you were goddamn right, sir. Points to Garth.
Doug, did you have who had this the next highest, Doug or Kirk?
I had where did you have it, Kirk?
I had it at 7.
All right, cool. Go ahead.
So go ahead, Kirk.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing about this story is what it does with the Batman-Superman relationship. It really just kicked that in high gear. And it made sense. It made that relationship make sense because up until then, they were the brave, the bold, or whatever, the world's finest, whichever one they were, world's finest, and they were buddies. Superman and Batman were buddies, and it made no sense. And this kind of took the relationship we see with them in modern comics, in the movies, everywhere, all starts here. And just an exploration of those two exact opposite ends of the coin in DC Comics is always what draws me to this book. All the other stuff is really great too. Just seeing Batman go through what he's gone through is amazing. But that's my favorite thing about it is the Superman-Batman relationship. So yeah, I mean, go Jay.
You also
before I speak,
you also get one of the best fucking fights in comics history. Superman getting the shit kicked out of him by Batman, and an old as fuck Batman at that. Fuck Superman.
And if it wasn't for this book, we wouldn't have the Martha moment
Adamant.
in Batman
We
v
wouldn't have
Superman.
We wouldn't have the modern day.
Yeah, go
All right,
ahead.
so without this book, we wouldn't have the modern day Batman. So I will give it credit for that. But does this book age well? That's the question. I don't think it does. That's why I have it at 8. I think it's a great book. I think it doesn't age well. I think it misses a few opportunities. I think it's a fantastic book for what it was trying to come across. It's a time capsule times. What gets my biggest knock is the Robin in this book. I fucking hate her. I hate her with a fucking passion. She is the worst Robin to ever don the costume. She is a damsel in distress most of the time, and she does nothing but hinder Batman. And then they give her a prominent fucking role in Dark Knight 3 and ruin that fucking comic book for her.
All right, I'm gonna step in and talk Dark Knight Returns now. Carrie Kelly, first of all, is an absolute liability as Robin. Let's start there. But I will say, when it comes to the Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller is the most overrated comic book writer of all time. This man, outside the Dark Knight Returns, has never written a good book. The second Dark Knight book, no. Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, no. Sin City, no. This man has not written a good book besides the Dark Knight Returns. I think the Dark Knight Returns is a good-ish book at most points. The stuff with the
wasn't 300
I think so. Was someone fact check him? Was 300 says okay. 300 is moderately okay. But the All-Star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder, one of the worst things to ever happen to comic books. But the Dark Knight Returns, as the book we're talking about, is good-ish. The stuff with the mutants is really cool. Like you said, it makes the relationship between Batman and Superman make sense, and I love that. I love the ending of this book. A lot of the stuff that it takes to get there is rough. I think about the midpoint. Once Batman and Joker come face to face again, this book instantly becomes great. It instantly kicks into high gear once the Joker comes in. But before that, it's all kind of a lot of world building, and I don't hate world building. I love world building. But I think the way that they do it doesn't necessarily tell us what Bruce Wayne's really been up to. It doesn't really do it. It's just, hey, guess what? Batman's here. And he's back, and that's taboo, which is like cool, but it's like I would have liked more characterization to Batman besides I'm old, I'm grumpy, and I'm gonna ride in on a motherfucking horse. That's literally Batman's characterization in the book, and I wish we could have gotten more to that story. Yeah. Hey,
Koho, you know what gives us a better old man Batman? Batman Beyond.
That's true, but I think that Dark Knight Returns is good. But number 2, Jay, is buying into the iconography a bit. It's buying into the nostalgic sort of feeling of reading The Dark Knight Returns for the first time a bit. I think the perfect placement, I think this deserves to be in the top 10, but I think where Doug and Kirk had it in the 8 to 7 range, perfect placement. But number 2, high. You're kind of biting into the nostalgia a little bit on that one. But so we'll go over to Douche for your number 2.
Cool. My number 2 was a yikes from earlier. And it is a comic book that was written by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. A1 Kingdom Come. I fucking love this book. It shows you what the world's like outside of the view from superheroes, and inside the world. It gives you a realistic take on what superheroism is. I don't know if that's the correct word. I think the illustration, the artwork, I think Alex Ross should have his artwork in fucking museums. It's beautiful. Page by page, blown away. It looks like actual painting work. The story within it is one of, it's just, for me, it works on multiple levels. It gives you something that you didn't realize you were going to read. And that's what I love about comic books. When you open a book and you're not exactly sure what you're going to get, and it impacts you a little bit. I think this book overall, I think I have it at the perfect place because my number 1, I think it does it a little. I think it does it the same, but a little bit better. But we'll get into that later. Kingdom Come, number 2. I know Kirk has it also, so.
Kirk, go ahead and talk about Kingdom Come.
Yeah, this is my number 3. You got to remember, you guys, nowadays when we think about Marvel and DC, we think of Marvel as the happy, colorful, fun place, and DC is the grim, dark depression fuel. But back in the day, it was the opposite. Marvel was known for its gritty realism in the comics anyway, and DC was colorful and optimistic and full of life and hope. And when they wrote this story and just took all that and flushed it down the toilet and basically wrecked the lives of all these heroes that we knew and loved, it was a punch to the gut. And that story of the thing is, it all made sense. It was a logical conclusion for what they were doing, and it was a commentary on the superhero world and is it sustainable? Is this realistic? Can a world where these heroes exist sustain itself? And how does that impact them? How does, like Doug said, how does it impact real people? So just taking that story and seeing where all these people end up, seeing that, like Doug said, that real world point of view, like that Wade and Ross did in Marvels. It was just amazing, and Alex Ross's, Doug said, its artwork is just amazing, page to page. What he did with all these characters and just the love he put into painting all those DC characters was amazing. It's a great book.
I'll go ahead and start with, I really enjoy Alex Ross's paintings within this book. I think the story is muddled. I like a lot of parts of it, but I don't necessarily track with Mark Waid's writing as a reader. I don't like Mark Waid as a writer. So when Kingdom Come comes around, I really like the style of the Spectre taking this guy through the universe and like narrating. And there are points like when he pops up on the station, everyone's like, "Who let you in?" I love that moment. I love that. But when it comes to the rest of it, the sort of commentary, like I like the commentary of the book and the idea of what the book's going for. I don't necessarily love the execution of the story within the book, because I think if you had given this to potentially, honestly, if you give this to Alan Moore, this probably would have been a better book. I think Mark Waid. I think Mark Waid as a writer is not the right person to deal with nuance and commentary. But Alex Ross was the perfect choice to illustrate this book. It looks incredible. I think there's a lot of cool parts to this book, but 2 and 3 I think is very high. If this was going to make my list, it'd be in the bottom 3, bottom 4 spots. But I again, I'm not a Mark Waid fan. Jay, what do you think about Kingdom Come, and why not on your list?
I knew that this one was going to come up as well, and again, I wanted different choices. I wanted a different approach to it, and I think that regardless of what you think about where I've put comics on my list, this one would have probably been like a 9 or a 10 for me. But it does give us the Mankind Liberation Front, seconded only to the Legion of Doom. This is the second best grouping of super villains ever. So respect. I love the fact that it made your list. It just wouldn't be this high for me.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we will go over to Mr. Kirk for your number 1, sir.
Okay, my number 1. I know I'm going to get flack for being too high, and it's going to hurt my grade, but I don't care, because I know as soon as this topic came up, I knew this was the story I was going to pick for my number 1 for favorite DC stories of all time. This was instantly number 1 for me, and that is Batman No Man's Land.
Literally 37 people. I looked because I've been putting the names of everyone who like is credited as the creators. I went to look. There's not a creator. There's a list of the 37 people who wrote, illustrated, inked, and colored this book.
37 in a row.
A lot.
Yikes!
37 people who did an amazing job writing this book. This book, basically, what the story is, if you recall it, it's Gotham City has just gone through a situation where back to back there was I think a plague outbreak and an earthquake, and I don't remember which order it was in, but basically Gotham was in pretty bad shape, and the government said, you know what, we're not doing this anymore, we're giving up, and they basically said, if you want to get out, and they sealed off Gotham City, and it was just the villains, the criminals, the people either who refused to leave or couldn't leave, had nowhere else to go, and then all the heroes. And they were left in this world. It has the greatest all-time opening to a story arc I've ever seen a comic. It's just 2 regular people. There's a kid walking down the street, and he's got a flashlight. and a guy comes up with a gun and he threatens to shoot him to steal his batteries. And the kid says, I know you're not going to shoot me for your batteries, for the batteries. And the guy says, why? He's like, well, because bullets are worth more than batteries. And it just perfectly, in those couple panels, sets up the world you're living in now, what Gotham City is now. And this book it's one of those books where it's just like, character moment, but it takes almost every character from the Batman family, the villains, the side characters, and gives them a moment. It takes a situation to break them down to their core aspects and gives them a moment where you see what they are and what they believe and what their moral focus is. And there's so many just awesome moments for every character. Commissioner Gordon, Mr. Zsasz, Two-Face, everybody gets a moment in this to just see really who they are. And I love that. My favorite thing about comic books is when it's written in a way where you're reading about a real person, where you see the heart and the mind behind what's going on, what's on the page. And this does that so perfect, so many times. That's why this had to be my number one choice.
This is a great book, and the one word I use to describe it is epic. It is a gritty epic of what does. I think the best way to describe it, like what I did is when I was younger, I went through the entire run, mainly of 80s classic Batman stories and 90s and all that. And I started at like Dark Knight Returns just to get the feel for the area, and I jumped around. I did Killing Joke, I did A Death in the Family, I did Nightfall, and then I did No Man's Land. And with each book, you can feel them just descending into more and more hopelessness. Batgirl gets broken, Robin is broken, Batman is broken, Gotham is broken. And when you get to No Man's Land, it's just the perfect finale to that run. And everything that happens in it just feels almost like an Avengers Endgame level thing. And it's just on the people of Gotham to fix it. And I absolutely love that story. To put this at number one, maybe a little high, but this is definitely in my top six DC books of all time. Great pick. Why No Man's Land, Doug and Jay?
No Man's Land, because I had a limited list that I was looking at. And I already chose my Batman pick that I wanted to go with. I love No Man's Land. I think it's a really perfect book almost. But I do enjoy Batman The Long Halloween better. So it's more on the list of which one do I return to more. So that's why Batman The Long Halloween made it over No Man's Land.
I think Long Halloween is a better story, but I love No Man's Land a lot. Both would have made my list. So not a huge ding. I understand it. You pick the right one, in my opinion. However, both are great. And maybe should have included putting this on here instead of fucking Flashpoint. Jay.
Suck a bag of holding of Richards. That's 50 dicks if you didn't know.
Here's the thing.
Wonder.
I have my main issue with this is that it literally has 37 people. You brought it up in the banner. Sometimes it gets a little bit difficult to get through in some points, and it's not because of the art style. It's mainly because there's a whole lot going on, and sometimes it just feels really disjointed to me. The overall story is really good. Personally, probably would have made my list had I even thought about it, but that's how far down this is to me personally. It just really wasn't even one that would have cracked my top 10.
But you know what cracked? But you know what cracked your top 10? The Judas Contract. Okay,
you're right. The Judas Contract is fucking amazing.
The Judas Contract is not No Man's Land, Jay. But also, we're also forgetting the murder of Sarah Essen, which is the most heartbreaking thing that happens in that book, where she literally dies to save kids at the hands of the Joker. So it's a fantastic book. If you've never read No Man's Land, it's a very large read. It's a dense read. It's a very worthwhile read. So Jay, what's your number one?
You ever really tried to think about some shit? What really kind of pisses you off? What aggravates you? What do you think could mentally break you down? Is it just one bad day? Batman: The Killing Joke by Alan Moore is my number one. You can hate it all you want. This is my favorite quote unquote origin story for the Joker, the failed stand-up comic recruited to break into a chemical facility as. Yes, I get it. The Mobius chair has told Batman that there are 3 Jokers. It's impossible. Shut the fuck up,
Doug. I know you love Flashpoint in the New 52, and you love Jeff Johns, but I'm telling you, we're never gonna get the 3 Jokers book at this point. Just relax. Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Batman: The Killing Joke really is. It's at its core trying to break Jim Gordon more than it is trying to break Batman. And this is the origin of Oracle. As a matter of fact, Barbara Gordon gets shot, spinal cord severed by the Joker, gets sexually molested. Jim is forced to ride a carnival ride, see these pictures. The comic is incredible. The movie, not so much. But we're not talking about that right now. I love if I'm gonna have a pass, I prefer multiple choice. You're not wrong. I didn't say it wasn't multiple choice. This is just my favorite of them. And I don't have to be asked 500 times, do you want to know how I got these scars? So love you, Garth, but shut it. This is by far one of my favorite endings to a comic book, when Batman and the Joker are just sitting and the Joker tells Batman a joke, and then a laugh. You get to see the Batman laugh. And they leave it very, very ambiguous at the end. Personally, I like to say he killed the Joker. I know. Shut the hell up. He killed the Joker, bro. He killed the Joker, dog. This is by far one of the best comic book stories ever. The art is amazing. The dialogue is fantastic. You get to see the in-depth madness or the method behind the madness of the Joker, trying to prove that really all it does is take one bad day and he's right there on the brink of breaking Jim Gordon. And I love to see supervillains be super villains. Are there better picks for better supervillains? Not in my fucking opinion, the Joker. But yeah, no, he's the number 1 villain of all time. Shut the hell up. Fucking, he kicks Sinestro in the dick too.
Right.
Anyways, go ahead.
All right,
bust me down.
All right, Kirk, this is your number 2. Go ahead and talk about it.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to stick up for my man Garth J. He was quoting a line from the Killing Joke.
I know,
yeah, this is, like I said before, I started to say before, Joker's my favorite villain of all time. He might be my favorite fictional character of all time. I'm just fascinated by his mania and how just the way his mind operates. This gives you such a nice glimpse into how his mind operates and how he thinks what he's doing makes sense. And how this is from his point of view, this is the way the world operates, and him trying to prove that to Batman and to Commissioner Gordon, and kind of state his case through all the horrible things he does. My biggest knock against it is that Jim Gordon comes off as a little too white hat in this, where he goes through all that stuff, and at the end, like, there's no real even temptation. He just gets off the ride. He's like, no, we got to do it by the book, and he's a little flat there. But I do love the end. That's one of my favorite thing about the Joker is his relationship with Batman. How in a way they're almost friends. They have that commonality between them and that connection. And then I personally don't think he kills the Joker. But the way that book ends is just a perfect definition of their relationship that they have together. And it's the perfect Joker story. And you get the Red Hood in this. You get the great backstory. Alan Moore, I said before, he can get a little clunky. This is him at his most perfectly streamlined, telling just a straightforward story and doing it very well. This is definitely my favorite Joker story of all time.
This is definitely the best Joker story ever written. I don't care if there is a literal book called Joker his name who wrote it escapes me. That is extremely disturbing. However, The Killing Joke is actually the best book. Alan Moore's second best work. I agree, his most streamlined. It's great. I think it's because DC held him to a limit with their mainstream characters, and he pushed that limit even within their limits, and you can tell. It's an excellent book. It's a perfect little kind of short book. It's not very long. Doesn't go on too long, but it tells you everything you need to know. And yes, guys, I hate to tell you, Batman fucking kills the Joker at the end of the book. He does it. He does it. It's right there. He does it on the page. He does it. Exactly. The laughter just stops and there's only one laughter path. It's Batman killing Joker. Deal with it. But the killing joke is great. Up here is right about where it would be. I understand it being your one. If you really love Batman and the Joker, I can understand it. I think it's not number one. I think it's number 2 or 3. Someone is going to bring up the number 1, both Alan Moore and DC book of all time in a minute. And we're going to talk about why you're all on trial in just a second.
So ahead, before Doug. We go into mine, the reason that this didn't make mine is because The Long Halloween made mine again. I love the Joker, but I love what he does more so because what happens is in Death of the Family, he shows an overarching of what happens when you fuck with an entire family and give them all one bad day. You break apart of the family. Same as Kirk, I thought Gordon kind of fell flat. You rape and break my daughter's back. I'm murdering you myself. That's not a father to me. It's not. I think the depiction and the backstory for Joker is what gets this book so high up for people. And I get it. I just like The Long Halloween better than this book.
Absolutely. All right. Go ahead and give them the correct number 1, Doug.
Correct number 1. Guys, I'm surprised nobody had it. And that is number 1, Watchmen. This book, I'm watching the series and watching the movie at the same time. This book is incredible. It takes the deconstruction of a superhero and puts them in our world. This is what happens when you have superheroes in our world. How much I love Kingdom Come, I love this book so much more. I think the book is far superior to any media that's been put on this. The artwork by Dave Gibbons is phenomenal. From the opening panel all the way to the final panel. The characters. You wonder why Batman's one of my favorite characters? Ask who my favorite character is in Watchmen. Rorschach. The guy's a psychopath, and it shows you what a psychopath does. Batman's very level-headed, but let's be honest, Batman's a sociopath and a psychopath. And this shows you what that is. It shows you what a fat superhero would be in Owlman 2. It shows you how sadistic someone with power would be in The Comedian. It shows you what happens to a child that's born of rape multiple times, because there's a woman in Vietnam, I'm saying the right word, right? Vietnam, who comes up to the comedian and says, "This is your child," and gets shot in the fucking head. Are you kidding me? And Dr. Manhattan does nothing because he has no empathy. This is Superman. This is what Superman is. It's Dr. Manhattan. He has zero empathy for anything going on in the world anymore because he's too goddamn powerful. This is the perfect DC comic book because it gives you real world issues. What would happen if superheroes were real? And who would watch The Watchmen?
All right. Before I place you both on the biggest trial of all time I've ever seen in your list, sucks. Watchmen. I can't disagree with anything Doug says, except that Dr. Manhattan and Superman are the same character. Sure, they're the same character, like analogy wise, but in the world. So go fuck yourself. But other than that, Watchmen is an incredible book. It is Moore's magnum opus, and this is the only DC comic book, not just DC comic, the only comic book that is listed on the top 100 American books of all time. And that's for a reason. Moore does a deconstruction of what DC does with superheroes very beautifully. It is a sprawling epic, and it is a very large story because he's creating a whole new world. But this is my perfect example of world building. We get it in the interstitials. We get it in the background, through we are meeting up with second versions of heroes that have already existed. Hollis Mason, the original Night Owl, literally writing a book about the history, and we get to see pieces of it explained in the back. Comedian and Dr. Manhattan carrying on through multiple incarnations of the team. Rorschach. Rorschach is honestly not a good person, and he shouldn't be hailed as a good person, but that's what makes him an interesting character to read about. And how why does he get to judge morality when he's no different than anyone else? And it's an incredible book. I don't need to praise it anymore or fillet it anymore. Jay, you're on trial. Why is Watchmen not
Go ahead
even
and
in your
highlight my
top
last
10?
comment in the YouTube.
Yikes! We're gonna take that off the screen.
It's true. It's okay. It's a deconstruction of comics. It's a deconstruction of superheroes. Cool. This is the wordiest fucking thing I have ever read in my goddamn life. I'm not saying that you're wrong. But if I wanted to read a book that had pictures in it, Horton Hears a Who's there too. I'm fucking with you.
That is the most disrespectful comment I have heard.
Fucking Jay.
I had to do it just to see your faces.
For that,
I had to do it.
2 bag of holdings. Eat 2 bag of holdings of dicks.
I rolled for
That's 100 pounds
for everything.
Everything.
No, I don't necessarily hate this book. But we've sat here and we talked about artists and writers who are a little bit too wordy. And again, that's really what this comes down to. I don't need to read 10 million words in a comic book. Great. Fantastic. Good story. Rorschach, sociopath, psychopath. Batman, not so much. Batman is just an orphan. Don't you fucking put that on him. He's an orphan, even in his own built family.
He's a fucking psychopath.
Rorschach is Batman if he didn't come from a rich home. Let's
boom.
Yo.
Boom.
Kirk, we're gonna go to Kirk. Why no?
I can't drop my mic. It's taped up.
To be fair, I'll start off by saying I came to Watchmen really late. I lived through like decades of hype for it before I actually sat down and read it, so it may have not lived up to that for me. Also, I would say I agree with you. It's very wordy. It almost has like a Lord of the Rings feel to it, where there's just layers and layers and layers, and like it's like I'm just like, here's 3% of this thing I wrote. Try to make heads or tails of it, and it is very wordy, and it's just such like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like Alan Moore's like, his point is like everybody's horrible. It's like, okay, that's a great story. Everybody sucks. And it just was a big downer for me. I would say Dr. Manhattan isn't Superman. He doesn't care. He's lost interest in humanity. He may be that. He might be Zack Snyder's Superman.
Can I pause real quick? So what I meant to say, okay, is Dr. Manhattan is Superman without the morality.
Yeah. And that's every character. It's so and so without the morality, because everybody's just very gray and and they're all very much like I said, they're just all bad people, and it's like not fun to read a story about all bad people. Jay, Doug, you said this was the perfect DC comic. This is the opposite of a DC comic, and I agree with you saying it's holding up a mirror to DC Comics. But if you're using it as the go-to DC story, this is the opposite of everything DC is and everything their characters and their stories have stood for. So I don't think, I'm not saying it's a bad story, but it's not like the iconic DC story.
But I think, to your point, you said that DC was hoping that all the heroes were like pictures of perfection in the time that this book came out. Mm-hmm. This book came out as a counterculture attempt to deconstruct the heroes that we had seen.
Sure.
It's to deconstruct it for everyone. For everyone, it was Spider-Man, it was Superman, it was Batman. These are the greatest American heroes, and there's nothing ever wrong with them. And it's breaking down the internal problems of every hero. I don't think everyone in this book is horrible. I mean, I think Owlman and Silk Spectre have issues, and they're not like perfect people. But I wouldn't go so far as to call them bad people. Like Comedian, Rorschach, Ozymandias. These are the bad people of this book. But I think we've talked enough about Watchmen. This has been your list, Doug, so far. Let's go ahead and put your list together. Oh boy. Number 10, Flashpoint by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert. I hate this already. Number 9, Crisis on Infinite Earths by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Number 8, Injustice Gods Among Us by Tom Taylor and Brian Bucoletto. Number 7, Superman Red Sun by Mark Millar. Not the correct one to be on here. I'm a little upset. Number 6, Batman No Man's Land by seriously, 37 people worked on this book. Number 5, Watchmen, Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons. Way too low. JLA Tower of Babel by Mark Waid. Number 3, Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. Number 2, Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. And number 1, Batman the Killing Joke by Alan Moore. I can't say this is a bad list. There's things that I disagree with. Tower of Babel at 4. Flashpoint being on this list at all. But we'll go ahead. I'm going to go. No, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and hand out grades. First place of the night, Jay Burnz. You're walking away with a B. I think you had the best list. You had Blackest Night, Brightest Day on your list, period. Injustice was a stroke of genius to have that on there. I'm pissed that you didn't have Watchmen. And you got real close to me devaluing you down to second there for a minute in your comments about Watchmen. I ultimately said, I'll give you first. You had more books that I think are good. You also didn't have Flashpoint on your list. Number 2, Doug Cassel with a B-. Yes, you have Flashpoint way too incredibly high. However, you had Watchmen and V for Vendetta, which these two didn't have. These two did not even have Watchmen on their list. So you second, but I had to devalue to a minus because you had the New 52 creator at number 3. And in last place, Kirk with a C+. Not a bad list at all. Just a few too many personal picks. Invasion, A New Beginning. I like No Man's Land at 1, though, over Long Halloween, and others a little too high. But still a good list, however. We only had 3 people on the panel, so therefore, your list sucks this week, sir. The overall grade I give is a B-. Good list, good episode so far. All right, guys. So next week, Disney soundtracks. Cody Newberry is back in the chair, kicking off November, talking Disney soundtracks. This is not scores. This is soundtracks. It's all of your Tarzans, your Beauty and the Beast, the songs. We're talking about songs within movies. So do not submit to Cody or I the soundtrack to Fantasia 2000. I'm sorry. I'm not taking it. Then, Guilty Pleasures. These are movies that are universally disliked that you enjoy. Do not send me a list on it, because that might be okay. But if you come and send me 12 Years a Slave on it, I'm going to say, get out of here. On the 20th, we are doing Oscars Gone Wrong Lead Performances Edition. This is because none of you submitted Best Actress lists. None of you submitted for Best Actress. What's wrong with it? I'm not okay. But we're putting actress and actor together. You can put someone who wasn't nominated or was nominated that you think should have won the Oscar for Best Actor or Best Actress in that year. And rounding out the month, day before my birthday, is biopics. And if Bohemian Rhapsody is not number 1, I will riot. So please put Bohemian Rhapsody on your lists. But that is going to do it tonight. Good night. Send your lists to Cody. And remember, your list sucks and drive unsafe.